You've spelunked into the Matt Cave.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. It's almost here, everyone. The joy that you hear in the air, the happiness you feel from your fellow man. Football season is almost back. I don't count preseason. That's not real football. In fact, it's dangerous because you have guys doing things on the field that they wouldn't normally do and winding up in the hospital. Yeah, NFL, I'm looking square at you. Anywho, this episode's not going to be about that. It's going to be about the Utah State football program, what to expect in year one of the Bronco era, how long I think he's going to last there, and a record prediction for the team. I teased this episode last week with my social media posts about Vegas or FanDuel putting the over-under on the wins for Utah State at 4.5. Personally, I think that's a little bit high. I would slam the under on that, but we'll get into why as we go through this episode. I'll break down the team by offense, defense, and then the records will come. Also talk about the coaching staffs as well as key players to watch. Last year, I hit on a lot of these players, Keanu Hill notwithstanding for BYU, but I have a good feel about this, and I'll talk about those players too. And as a little nugget at the end for all my gamers out there, I will be talking about Battlefield 6 and just why it is such a big deal right now. Why this beta is different from every other beta we have seen from any other game. So if you're not necessarily a football fan, stick with me. I'll get to the video games here at the end of the episode. But as always, thank you all so much for being here. You all are amazing. Please like, subscribe, comment, wherever it is, however you listen. 5 stars, thumbs up. You know, all of that stuff goes a long way. And it takes 2 seconds from you. And I greatly appreciate each and every one of you that have done it. You're rock stars. And I know that term has kind of come on to rough times because corporate America uses it all the time. But I genuinely mean it. And then, if you could do me a favor, just one more favor, share this with one person that you think will enjoy the program. I would greatly appreciate that. All right, so now let's dive into things. All right, yes, the fight songs are back. I will be doing them as I introduce each segment as I talk about the teams this year. A little bit more editing for me, but I think it's more fun. So I've got the Utah State fight song playing underneath me right now just for a little bit, and then it'll go back to the regular music. But let's see what we have on tap for Utah State. So last year, not a great year. Obviously, the drama and the just weirdness that surrounded the program, where they had an interim athletic director for a long time because of the controversy surrounding the football program, former head coach Gary Anderson. They are still embroiled in a lawsuit, as far as I know, about wrongful termination and all of that stuff. Gary Anderson, his staff mostly left as well when he was fired. And so they were fielding a bunch of what felt like volunteer firefighters to be their coaches for the season. And they still wound up with 4 wins. And they were competitive in a lot of those games. So kudos to the players for not quitting on the year when they easily could have. And for the coaching staff that was there for getting the guys ready for most of the games. So as we look at last year's performance, it was mainly Jalen Royals carrying the offense, along with their stud running back, who has unfortunately transferred. But their stud running back, Rasul Faison, had over 1,100 yards rushing last year. And if it weren't for my guy, Robert Briggs, getting injured in the first game, he probably wouldn't have had that breakout season. So kudos to him. He moves to the SEC, I believe. And Utah State has a big hole to fill. But never fear, Aggies fans. You still have Bryson Barnes there at quarterback. So Bryson Barnes, as Ute fans know, is a wonderful run-first quarterback. He's not afraid to throw the ball. The term gunslinger gets thrown around a lot. I don't like it. He's just not afraid to throw the ball anywhere. But sometimes he gets in trouble with that because he gets under pressure, and so he just hucks it up there. And that worked for Jalen Royals a lot because that guy is an NFL talent. He's currently rostered with the Chiefs, catching balls from Patrick Mahomes. Now he doesn't have that receiver. He doesn't have that outlet anymore. And so the offense is still going to be pretty wide open. The Utah State coaching staff and Bronco Mendenhall has brought in Kevin McGivern, who has coached at Utah State before. And Aggies fans, here's a little blast from the past for you. The last time Kevin McGivern was your offensive coordinator, a little quarterback named Chucky Keaton was starting. That was the last time Kevin McGivern was coaching at Utah State. He is now your offensive coordinator again, and that season was a really good year for Utah State. They went 9-5, 7-1 in the Mountain West. They did lose in the championship game to Fresno State, but they won their bowl game, the Poinsettia Bowl, against Northern Illinois. So Kevin McGivern does have a good track record up there in Logan, and it is a spread offense. So it's not going to be a ground and pound. It's not going to be boring to watch. I mean, last year wasn't boring either. Just to give you an idea of how not boring the season was, Utah State had a top 25 offense. Yeah, they did. They had almost 270 yards passing, which got them 21st in the country. They had almost 200 yards rushing per game, which is 21st in the country. And they scored almost 32 points, 31.9, which was good enough for 38th in the country. Unfortunately, the defense, which is why they brought in Bronco Mendenhall, I believe, allowed 37.8. That tied for 128th out of 132 schools. Not a great defense. So that's why we have Bronco Mendenhall in, and Nick Howell is joining him. Nick Howell has been following Bronco Mendenhall his whole career. As soon as he got away from high school coaching, Nick Howell was a BYU defensive intern when Bronco was there in 2007, and then worked his way up to defensive coordinator in 2013. And Cougar fans, 2013 was the year of Taysom Hill until he got hurt. And then we had guys like Christian Stewart, Billy Green, Benson Manwaring, Jason Munz, Ammon Olsen. Not the greatest quarterback room behind Taysom. But on the defense, yeah, the defense that this team had, I don't know, how about a guy named Kyle Van Noy? Yeah, he was on this defense. Other than that, Uwani Unga was really solid in the middle of that defense. Spencer Hadley, I think if he didn't have injury issues, could have gone pro. Another future pro, Daniel Sorensen, was in the defensive backfield. And you also had Bronson Confusi, who's also in the NFL. You also had a freshman named Dallin Levitt, who Aggies fans know very well because he transferred to Utah State. He was a freshman on this team. So the coaching staff does have some chops. It's not a bunch of nobodies like I thought it might be. And then you also have, obviously, the 13th Apostle, Bronco Mendenhall, leading them all. Maybe he's trying to shake that moniker of mine for him because recent photos of Bronco have him with a full beard. I guess coaching at Utah State will do that to a man. But let's look forward at the schedule for the Aggies. Obviously, last year, 4-8, not the year anybody was expecting. In fact, a lot of people, myself included, before the drama with Gary Anderson and all of that, I had Utah State as a dark horse to challenge Boise for the Mountain West crown. I didn't think they were going to beat Boise, but I thought they were going to challenge. And then everything happened, and they wound up 4-8. Especially that game against Utah gave me a glimmer of what the season could have been had everything stayed together. So it was kind of a heartbreaking year for the Aggies up in Logan. Now let's look forward at the schedule for Utah State. And, oh boy, it's a tough one. Start out against UTEP at home. That should be a victory. UTEP is not a very good football school. Never really have been. They're in Conference USA. Usually have a losing record. I think Utah State will be able to dispatch them very well, especially with an entire offseason to prepare. They're going to be fine up in Logan. And then the very next week, they travel to Texas A&M, who is one of the contenders to win the SEC. Yeah, that's going to be a good paycheck for the Aggies to get. Then they come home the very next week against Air Force, who has Dylan Carson, a healthy Dylan Carson, and I think Air Force might have a special year. I know the military academies, Army and Navy, both had a very special year last year with their awesome quarterbacks. Air Force doesn't have that quarterback, but they have Dylan Carson. And I'm looking for a very good year from Air Force. And something that Phil Steele has said that I subscribe to wholly with the military academies, when their starting lineups have a majority of upperclassmen, meaning seniors and juniors, they're primed for a big year. And that's what Air Force has this year. So I'm thinking that's going to be a loss, even though it is at home. And then you have McNeese at home, FCS school. I think BYU has played them in the past. Utah State should win that one pretty handily. And then they travel to Vanderbilt. So 2 SEC schools in the first 6 weeks. Not ideal. That's going to be another blowout because Diego Pavia, Vanderbilt is a very strong program now, which is very weird to say. But the transfer portal and all that stuff has opened up a lot of opportunities for these guys that would be depth guys at other SEC schools to then be starters at Vanderbilt and kind of take out their aggression, for not being picked as a starter at places like Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, stuff like that. So, yeah, that's going to be a tough one. That's a loss. And then they have 2 weeks, so they have a bye week, and then they go to Hawaii. That's always a tough trip. Just ask BYU. Just ask Utah. It's always a tough trip. Utah State, you know it well by now. That's probably a loss. Hawaii has a pretty strong roster this year. Timmy Chang is their head coach. He was a very good quarterback at Hawaii, and he has that same offense that he ran that is pretty much wide open. And if Utah State can't hang on to the ball, that's a definite loss. Then they come home very next week against San Jose State, who is right up there with Boise State, picked to win that Mountain West like a third of the time. Well, I'd say a quarter of the time from what I see. A lot of people are having San Jose State as the dark horse. Ken Niumatalolo, the former head coach of Navy, was in the running to be the head coach at BYU when Bronco left. That's a loss. Then they travel to New Mexico in a potential revenge game. Now, this is a bottom feeder game for the Mountain West. New Mexico hosting Utah State. I don't know. This one is a toss-up 50-50. If you're a betting person, you stay away from this game. I would say it depends on how the season's going. If Bryson Barnes is hurt or he's struggling, I would pick New Mexico. But if Bryson Barnes is doing well, he's on a hot streak, I'll pick Utah State easy going away. But not confident. And then they come home against Nevada on November 8th. Close game. Again, Nevada has usually been towards the bottom of the Mountain West. They are being picked ahead of Utah State by a couple of spots pretty much everywhere. But that doesn't really mean anything when you're at the bottom of a conference because those teams can flip-flop all over the place. Like we're not picking up there with Boise State and San Jose State here. So in this game against Nevada, I'm going to go with Utah State because it's at home for the Aggies. And then they travel to UNLV with new head coach Dan Mullen with that SEC experience. He coached at Mississippi State and Florida, so he has a lot of weight. He brought in a lot of transfers. He also is known for his stint on ESPN, which got him some weight in the transfer portal. UNLV is going to win that one. It's in Vegas. And then they travel to Fresno State. Fresno State has been weird since Jeff Tedford retired. I don't know on this one. I'm going to go with Fresno State just because it's at home for them, and the kickoff is at 8:30 p.m. Mountain, which I know isn't that different for Utah State and the Mountain West, but that is a really late kickoff any way you slice it. And then the home game against Boise State, which kind of a rivalry, kind of not. That's a loss. I mean, Boise State is basically a Power 4 program. Utah State is building there if they can hang on to Bronco Mendenhall. Now, overall, the record that I'm predicting for this team, the floor is a 1-win season. Their 1 win coming against McNeese. That's the floor. It's a very low floor and a very easy bar to clear. Their ceiling is a 5-win season. So I am not predicting Utah State to go to a bowl. I'm just not. That would be incredible. They would have to pull a lot of upsets a la BYU last year. I just don't think Utah State has the juice to do it, especially with brand new systems on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Bronco Mendenhall is very good at beating teams he's supposed to beat. But if you look at his first season at Virginia, he went 2-10. I mean, his first season at BYU, I think he went 6-6. So there's a lot of ground to make up, especially in this new era of college football. Personally, I was shocked to see Bronco Mendenhall come back and coach at New Mexico and now at Utah State. He is all about program development, having guys go up through his program, learn his system, and then become starters when they're juniors and seniors. Just look through the history of the BYU program. You'll see that all over the place. That's not college football anymore. If the kid isn't playing, he's going to leave. We'll see what happens in the long term. Again, Ceiling, 5 wins. Floor, 1. My prediction is a 3-9 season for Utah State. Maybe winless in the Mountain West. Who knows? But that's my prediction. 3-9, competitive in most of the games. They're going to get run off the field at Texas A&M. They're going to get run off the field against Vanderbilt and against Boise State. But the rest of the year, there are a lot of toss-up games. I'm not saying there's no hope, but there's very little hope up in Logan. All right, let's move to the roster and players to watch. So I said his name a lot earlier. Bryson Barnes. I mean, that's an easy cop-out one. Starting quarterback, of course, you're going to be watching him. But Bryson Barnes is such a unique quarterback, dating back to his time at Utah, where he can carry a team to a win. Look at what he did against Florida. Nobody expected anything from Bryson Barnes in that game for Utah. First play of the game, bomb. So it is possible that Bryson Barnes can carry this team to a couple of wins. So yes, that is a cop-out. That is easy for me to say. But the other one is Miles Davis, a running back. Cougar fans, you should know that name. He was a running back for BYU. He could never break into the rotation. He couldn't stay healthy. And when he had his opportunities, he took his opportunities in one game, and then otherwise he just couldn't work his way up that loaded running back room. And so he's transferred to Utah State. He's another name to look out for. He could be the starter. It's pretty hard for him there. Derek Jameson is a very good running back, as well as Javen Jacobs. So, but Miles Davis, if he is your starting running back, could fill the shoes of a Robert Briggs type. So, or a Rasul Faison type. He really could. All right, so that's the offensive side of the ball. Wide receiver room is very, very bare. Everybody's gone. And then the tight end room, not much there either. Let's move over to the defense. Same guy as I said last year. Same guy. Ike Larson. Ike Larson, in what was considered a down year for him for the Utah State Aggies, he did not make them All-Mountain West teams. He still had 80 tackles, 9 passes broken up, and an interception. So the interception number is low. And honestly, I am shocked that he stayed at Utah State. I would have thought that a team like Utah or BYU would have looked at this past season, and just be like, yeah, it's an off season, because why wouldn't it be with everything that happened there? Why not test the waters there, see if we can't pry him loose? So kudos to Ike Larson for staying, for displaying loyalty to the Utah State program. And I'm thinking there might be a bounce back year for him. He is a very, very good defensive back. He is a defensive back that can play on Sunday. He just is. He is everywhere when you watch Utah State's defense. The past 3 years, he is everywhere. Look for Larson on the back of the jersey. You're going to find him near the ball on every snap, almost. So I think Ike Larson is going to have a bounce-back year. I think he could be the best defensive player in the Mountain West, especially in a Bronco Mendenhall, Nate Howell, air quotes, Nate Howell, defense, because of guys like Daniel Sorensen played that same position and made it to the NFL. Ike Larson is my other pick. And then BYU fans, there's another one for you to watch out for. Landon Rico is going to have a lot of work. He just is. There's no offensive line for Bryson Barnes, and then there's nobody for him to throw the ball to. I was going to say nobody that can catch the ball, but it didn't come out right. But we're here anyway. Landon Rico, former BYU punter, transferred to Utah State. He's going to have a lot of work, so he could be an X factor as well. He could be the reason why Utah State stays in games by pinning opposing offensives deep in their own territory. So there it is, Aggies fans. Agree with me? Disagree with me? Awesome. Let me know on the socials. Facebook, Instagram, the Matt Cave Podcast. You can find me there. Let's chat about it. 3-9, I think, is the season that Utah State will have. But, again, the ceiling is 5. The floor is 1. Okay. So that's it for the Utah State preview. I am doing these by record of the previous season. And so next week I will be doing the University of Utah and why I'm not as high as everybody else is on Devin Dampier. All right. So let's move it right along to the Battlefield 6 beta. I posted about this on my socials the past week. It's incredible what we've seen here. Call of Duty used to have the highest concurrent player peak on Steam. And what that means, obviously, is how many players are playing at the same time and are actively playing. They don't just have the game booted up. They're like in a match, actively playing. Previously, that was Call of Duty at around 350,000 to 375,000-ish. Battlefield 6, their peak was Saturday night at 521,079 people actively playing the game. Holy moly. That's a lot of people. That crushed the peak of Call of Duty. I also said this in my social media post. It's not a Call of Duty killer. There's no such thing. There's not going to be a game that takes over Call of Duty that's going to be like, oh yeah, we're the new Call of Duty. We're better than Call of Duty. That's not really the thing anymore. That's not the market anymore. Call of Duty is its own monster. They've changed from being a military sim shooter to whatever you want to call it now, a battle royale, pop culture meets first-person shooter sort of game. Not like Fortnite, but basically Fortnite. You know what I mean? It's not third-person shooter, it's first-person shooter. It's drop in, in the war zone. And then there's also the regular 6v6 multiplayer where you have like domination, capture the flag, team deathmatch. You still have that. Hardpoint, search and destroy. So you still have that as well with Call of Duty. But there's a rather large population of gamer that doesn't want that. That never wanted that. Like, nobody wants to play as Cardi B. I don't want to say nobody, but this group of gamers does not want to play as Cardi B in what is supposed to be billed as a military sim shooter. They don't want to play as Beavis and Butthead or Terminator or Coach from Beavis and Butthead or anybody from American Dad or Family Guy or anything like that. That's why they don't play Fortnite. And so the only other option was Call of Duty, right? Enter Battlefield. And I am stunned that EA has allowed the Battlefield team to not fall into that trap. Into the trap of we need to compete with Call of Duty. We have to. We need to knock them off their pedestal. We need to do the same thing they're doing, but better. We've seen that before. Battlefield 2042 was basically that. It was, we need to make our game bigger. Bigger is better. Bigger, bigger, bigger. Bigger maps, more weapons, more vehicles, more destruction of the environment, and everybody's going to love it. Well, turns out nobody loved it. Battlefield 2042 is the worst rated... Battlefield 2042, as you can tell, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself there. I'm going to keep that in. Battlefield 2042 is the worst rated Battlefield game in the franchise's history. Even more so than Battlefield Victory or Battlefield V, the World War II version of Battlefield that nobody asked for. That one has better ratings than Battlefield 2042. So, I'm stunned that EA and the team behind Battlefield looked at that and went, all right, we learned something. Bigger isn't always better. So instead of 128 players, they're back down to the 64 for Conquest, which is 32 versus 32, broken down into squads of 4. You can capture up to 8 points depending on the size of the map with tanks, armored personnel carriers that have anti-infantry cannons on them. There's like fighter jets that you can pilot, Apache helicopters, and then you also have your M1 Abrams tanks going in and causing havoc. And then you also have your infantry. And what's really unique, not unique, but what they're doing is they're bringing back the class system where you have Assault, Recon, I'm missing 2. Assault, Recon, Medic, and I'm missing 1. Oh, that's frustrating. But there's 4, and it's 4 different kinds. Engineer, that's the one. And so you have those 4, and they have certain kits that can be used. They did away with that in Battlefield 2042. They kind of did away with it in Battlefield 1 and V. So bringing that back is very nice, and they have a game mode dedicated to it. So if you don't like that change, or if you didn't like how that was, how you are restricted in playing Medic, but you can't use a sniper rifle, there's a whole other game mode where you can do that. But there's also a game mode where if you like that sort of segregation, it's there for you too. There's also something called Breakthrough, which is a combination of Conquest and Rush. Rush has always been one of my favorite game modes in every Battlefield. It's the one I play the most. It's the one I played the most in Battlefield 3 and the one I played the most in Battlefield 1. I was a big fan of Battlefield 1, by the way. That was the World War I adaptation. I thought they did a wonderful job. It was really good, really fun, and just people didn't like how it wasn't modern and they didn't have their automatic rifles, which whatever. Back to Breakthrough. It's a combination of Conquest and Rush. Rush is an infantry-based game mode, meaning there's no vehicles. You could call in artillery strikes in Battlefield 1, and you could call in basically the same thing in Battlefield 3, for example. And so you can't... So let's say you capture the 2 points. It's 2 points for like 5 different slots across the map. There's attackers and defenders. Attackers have 100 respawns or 100 troops to try to capture that first point. And then you go, you capture both, you get your reinforcements back, and you go again, etc. What is unique about this game mode is that there's vehicles in Breakthrough. You can have tanks, you can have the armored personnel carriers, you can have those things. I believe there are helicopters on a couple of the maps. So that adds a new element to it where it's not just infantry rushing at each other, hence the name Rush, but Breakthrough, and it's so much fun. It really, truly is. I haven't spent as much time as, like streamers or video game reviewers have played in Battlefield 6 because I want to keep it fresh for when the game launches in October for myself. But from what I have played, it is so dang fun. And it also reminds me of how dang old I am when it comes to gamers. I'm 35. I may as well be an 80-year-old boomer because I spawn in, die. And then so I just all right, I'm going to hang back and I'm just going to get a couple of picks with my sniper rifle and feel good about myself by sniping somebody who's not even looking at me. That's what I did, and it felt good. And then you can change the attachments on the weapons as well. So if you don't want a huge sniper glint on your sniper rifle, you could just take the scope off and just have iron sights, and you don't get the sniper glint. And so people don't know that you're really a sniper looking down sight at them, and so you're not giving anything away. It's so much fun. Spelunkers, if I could say one thing to you about gaming this October, it's going to be fun. For all of you Call of Duty fans, you're getting a new Call of Duty. You are. A new Black Ops is coming out this October. Borderlands fans, I'm one of them. We're getting a new game this October, Borderlands 4. And they said they learned a lot of lessons from Borderlands 3. The potty humor is basically gone and is going to feel more like Borderlands 2 when it comes to the story. That's outstanding because the story in Borderlands 2 is one of the best in gaming history. And then, for everyone who is not a Call of Duty fan or has become disenfranchised with the IP, Battlefield 6 will scratch that itch. There are a plethora of game modes for you as well. So if you do not want to dive in to that 32 versus 32 conquest, capture the point, hold the point sort of game mode, you want something more, I don't want to say intimate, but smaller, there are game modes where it's 8 versus 8 domination. There are those game modes for you, so you can go something smaller, and there's no vehicles in them. So there's something for every type of first-person shooter fan coming out this October. There's the role-playing game fan, there's the Call of Duty fan, and then there's the first-person shooter fan that hasn't had a home in a while. There's something for everybody, and it's very exciting. So Battlefield 6, the open beta, their first one closes here at the end of the day of me recording this, August 10th. They will be doing, I believe, 2 more before the game comes out in October. They've already fixed a bunch of the stuff that was wrong at the start of the beta. In Europe, there are login queues that are ridiculously long. Not so much here in the States. They have the servers ready here in the States more so. So, suffice it to say, I'm looking forward to this fall for more than just football and basketball returning and hockey. We got really good video games too. All right, that's the show this week, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you all next week when we spelunk back into the Matt Cave.